Welcome to Leaders of Future. I would request you to pause for a moment right now. Right now, at this exact moment, there are over 4,000 engineers in Silicon Valley whose job is to make sure that you cannot stop scrolling. They are psychologists, technology experts. They study your behavior, they predict your impulses, they design your distraction. They know more about your behavior, about your own self, and they are better funded than anybody else. This is not technology. This is a battle for your attention. This is not science fiction. This is today's reality. Today, we are not suffering from lack of information. We are suffering from lack of attention. I'm Manish Behl, and today we are going to fight back for our attention. And my guest today has spent 20 years the most important question of our time, attention. She has written over 200 research papers, and many of these research papers are appeared in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, and BBC. She is the author of a groundbreaking book, Attention Span. Dr. Mark, welcome to Leaders of Future. It's an absolute honor to welcome you to our podcast, Leaders of Future.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start very simple. What exactly is attention and why it is so critical for our life and success today?
That's a very difficult question. So what is attention? I always like to think of William James, who's known as the father of psychology. And so when I'm asked, what is attention? I always look toward him, and he says, attention is, we can recognize it when we see it. It's about giving your full consciousness to something, right? We have so many things in the world that we can select to focus on. And those things that we choose to focus on, that's what we're doing with attention.
It's very simple, as you said, but it's also very difficult. It's not tangible thing that you can touch, feel. I don't have any meter to see how much of attention do I have. Is attention a limited resource or an unlimited resource? How can I feel it?
It is a limited resource, but it depends on the kind of attention. So we have different kinds of attention. Some of our attention is automatic. So automatic attention happens if you're walking. You're not really paying attention to walking. Or if you're driving on a straight route, that can become automatic attention. When we get a notification on our screens, we immediately respond to it. That's automatic attention at work. And automatic attention does not use very much resources at all. But there's another kind of attention, and this is a more important kind of attention for our discussion here, and that's controlled attention. It's our conscious attention. So that's when we really focus on something, we take it in, we're mentally processing it, we're engaged with it, and that does use a lot of resources. And so we have limited cognitive resources, and they drain throughout the day, depending on how much controlled attention we use and a number of other things as well.
I work on decision making, and decision making requires a lot of attention. And we always talk about that you have a limited resource to make cognitive decisions. You can make an automatic decisions or intentional decisions, but when you make an intentional decision, there's a limited resource. I was reading your research. You said that in 2004, research showed that average screen focus was about 2 minutes and 30 odd seconds. By 2020, it had fallen to 47 seconds. So we moved from minutes to seconds. How did you measure that attention? And when you saw this falling trend line, how did you feel? Fear, urgency, kind of grief? Can you just explain a little bit on that?
So first of all, I measured it empirically. So I try to get objective measures because you can simply ask people, how much have you paid attention in the last hour? People are not very good at that. It's very subjective. So I use objective means. And typically what I use is specialized software that can detect when people are shifting to other screens. It can detect when you click on a window to bring it in the foreground. And so we're basically calculating how long people are spending on any particular window before they switch to something else. And it's a proxy for how people are paying attention on their screens, but it's a very good proxy.
And when you saw that, it's moved from 2 minutes to about 47 seconds, what kind of trend line showed you, and what was your thoughts when you saw it first time?
Well, back in 2004, when we found it to be 2.5 minutes, I was astonished. And I thought, wow, that's shorter than I imagined, because I felt myself being unable to pay attention, but I didn't think it was that short. In 2012, it measured about 75 seconds on average. And then starting from around 2016, we've done multiple measures, and others have done measures as well. And it averages about 47 seconds. How did I feel then? I was very, very surprised. But so much in our world has changed. But there was, over a 20-year period, there has just been a complete change in the digital landscape. And so when you look back, it shouldn't be that surprising that attention was so short.
Thanks for giving that perspective. It's when I read this data, I was slightly alarmed. If this resource is shrinking, where are we heading to? Because in mindfulness, we say attention is the foundation of awareness. Without it, we are always on an autopilot. So, Dr. Mark, today, it feels like that everyone, be it social media, brands, politicians, almost everyone is fighting for our attention. A former Google professional, Justin Harris, testified how people are, or organizations are fighting for our attention. In 2017, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings said that our biggest competitor is not Amazon or HBO, it is sleep. And we are competing with sleep. That's what his words were. And we are winning. So these institutions and corporations are openly at war with the human body's recovery mechanism for our attention. So what kind of world we have built? Why has attention become so valuable asset or a currency?
Well, it's because our attention is monetized, right? So if companies can get us to pay attention to a social media site, the longer we're there, the more likely it is that we're going to click on some kind of advertising. And of course, that earns revenue. So it all boils down to that our attention is worth money. And I find that very interesting, this comment about competing with sleep, because it suggests that there's very little concern for human welfare and our health and well-being, if it's really the case that we should be giving up sleep in order to give our attention to these sites.
Because I think sleep is the mechanism which somehow replenish the lost attention and we recover it back.
That's right. That's exactly right. If you get a really good quality night of sleep, you can start your day with a full tank of cognitive resources. And I like to use the metaphor of having a tank of resources, and we use that in our attention. And so sleep is so valuable for that.
Are these systems which are newly designed and hold our attention within their grip? And how can a common man counter this?
I would say that there are individual differences, of course. Not everybody succumbs to the design features of social media and other sites. So there are some people who are able to pull away and spend very little time, but others, of course, aren't able to, because there are just individual differences. And it's important to realize that. And everything is designed, leveraging human psychology to keep our attention and stay on these sites, right? Because ultimately, as I said before, it's about revenue. The longer we pay attention, the greater is the chance of generating revenue.
Dr. Daniel Goleman, who coined the term emotional intelligence, identified very interesting thing, what he called amygdala hijack. And the moment you're excited, there is an outrage of flood of neurons in your brain, especially in prefrontal shutdowns. So this prefrontal cortex, which comes under attack of of this flood of fear, all those emotions. And prefrontal cortex is the seat of wisdom, judgment, and values. The entire architecture today, social media, is a machine for triggering this amygdala hijack in an industrial scale. We are not just distracted, we are being emotionally dysregulated collectively, constantly by design. What's your view that why this is happening and what can we do?
Yeah, because a lot of what we see online attracts us at a very basic emotional level. So humans have very basic emotions. We have fear, we have surprise, we have laughter, sadness, anger. And a lot of social media, it elicits these reactions from us. And these reactions can be automatic, right? Because they're so deeply ingrained in us. We can't help but respond. So people who are watching, say, TikTok, and you might find a video that's hilarious, you can't help but laugh. And when we laugh, it actually creates a kind of self-reinforcement loop because we laugh, we feel good, we want more. And so we keep staying at the site so that it keeps this feedback loop going. Now, here's what happens. We're exposed to so much sensationalist content, and there is competition for our attention. And so, of course, people want to create content that's more and more sensational. And so we get desensitized to it, right? When you start seeing extreme content everywhere, it doesn't shock you anymore. And so it's another kind of cycle that we're experiencing. Content is getting even more outrageous. It's trying to create stronger emotions that come out of us. And of course, we keep getting desensitized because we're seeing more and more of it. And of course, it incentivizes content creators to be able to feed us this kind of extreme content.
Would now interested to learn more that why this is happening. Even after you get fatigued, you're tired, your eyes are drooping, but you're still hooked on to a phone like an addiction.
A lot of the attention that we give to things like social media is automatic attention. So we're not really putting in much cognitive effort. It's very easy to process. In fact, we did a research study where we found that when people accumulate sleep debt, they spend more and more time on social media. And the reason for it is because they don't have the cognitive resources to be able to focus on anything more difficult. Why is that the case? Because social media is lightweight, it's easy to process, we don't have to use a lot of cognitive resources. And so you asked, why is it that, people late at night are still looking at social media? It's because we don't have the resources available to be able to do anything more difficult.
That's a great insight. I work on neuroscience. What's happening inside our brain when we are constantly shifting attention from something important or to social media, and why it takes long when you are distracted, come back to our focus attention?
So I like to use the metaphor that we have an internal whiteboard in our mind. So whiteboard is where, you can write on it and you can erase it. And every time we switch our attention to something new, we have to retrieve what's called a schema, which is the information we need to be able to understand a particular task. So if I'm reading something, I have to bring up a schema to help me understand this task. And then I suddenly switch to, say, email. I have to retrieve a schema that helps me understand, here's what I do when I'm on email. And so going back to this idea of having an internal whiteboard and thinking about that as a metaphor, every time we switch, we have to write the information we need for the task, and then we suddenly switch again. We're erasing that in our minds and writing new information. And then we switch again. And so we're erasing and we're rewriting, and we keep doing that. And that wears us down, right? It's not only that we're using cognitive resources to focus on a particular thing, but the act of switching and having to keep reorienting our minds, that's also using up our cognitive resources. They are precious and they are few, they are limited.
Studies shows that constant switching increases stress, fatigue, and error also if you're constantly doing this.
Yes. And we found that in our research. So we had people wearing heart rate monitors as they're going about their normal days. We measured people in the workplace. We've measured college students during their waking hours. And we find that when people are switching their attention on screens rapidly, we see their what's called heart rate variability, which is a measure of stress. We see that stress measure going up, and it's directly correlated with switching their attention rapidly.
When I started working very early 90s, my boss said that you need to be very good multitasker. And long after that, I realized that multitasking is not a great thing to do. Late when I was working on mindfulness, and one of the workshops with one of the top consulting firm leaders were sitting, and I said, we should concentrate on one task at a time. So I got a very hard pushback from people. It's absolutely wrong. All the good managers need to learn multitasking. In fact, to become a good or successful leader, knows how to do multitasking. As a result, I see this narrative all around in corporate world that if you are not a good multitasker, you may not be a good leader. And as a result, we see people feel busy all day but achieve very little. Your research contains devastating finding in the history of workplace productivity about multitasking. Would you like to explain about a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, multitasking, it hurts performance. So I have to disagree with these top leaders who said otherwise. And I'm going to give 3 reasons why it harms performance. First of all, people make more errors when they multitask. And we know this from decades of studies. These are studies mostly in the laboratory. And it shows that when people are multitasking, they just simply make a lot more errors compared to doing tasks sequentially, one after the other. There was a study of physicians in the course of their actual work, and they found that when the physicians were multitasking, they actually made more prescribing errors. Number 2 goes back to this idea I talked about, the internal whiteboard. So there is just simply a lot more effort involved in switching, and it takes more time. But if you're switching among different tasks, it takes longer to finish all the tasks because of the fact that we have to reorient to the new task. That whiteboard, that internal whiteboard, we have to bring up a new set of instructions that we need to do the task. And reason number 3 why multitasking harms performance is stress. And we've measured that. We've measured that in people's actual environments when they're multitasking. It's been measured in multiple laboratory studies. And even if you ask people subjectively, how do you perceive your mood right now? People report having more stress. Let me say a little bit more about multitasking. So we tend to think of multitasking as doing 2 or more things at the same time. It's not possible. Humans are not wired to do that unless one of those activities involves automatic attention. And so automatic attention would be things like walking. So people can walk and text at the same time because walking is automatic, and texting requires controlled attention. We have to be conscious of what we're doing. But then what happens when a car comes and almost cuts you off, right? You have to stop texting and you have to pay attention to the environment. You can't use automatic attention anymore. So multitasking is about switching your attention between different things rapidly. And that's why, people make more errors. It takes longer and people have more stress because they're switching back and forth among different things.
I was reading this study on workplace productivity that every single interruption, it takes about 23 minutes and 15 seconds to return to the full cognitive engagement with full attention. And the average worker is interrupted every 2 to 3 minutes. And if I do the math, there is no way that deep working is happening in any of the office today. So how did we get here and why nobody is talking about it?
They're starting to talk about it. How did we get here? Well, let's just look at what happened over the last 20 years. We've had the introduction of social media, right? Facebook came out in 2003. Twitter, which is now X, TikTok came out later. Smartphone was introduced in e-commerce, really took off in the early 2000s. And email just exploded in volume. So there have been so many changes in our digital world over the last 20 years that, when you think about all these changes, maybe it's not so surprising that it's so hard for people to pay attention to any one thing very long. I mean, the internet it's like being in a huge candy store, right? How can you just select one thing, right? There's so many things to pay attention to, and so people just indulge in what it has to offer.
I was reading a study by Stanford University. They found the people who multitask are worst at it. Worst at filtering, worst at memory, worst at task. And I found that multitasking is actually very bad and harming not only our mental abilities, attention, but harming also the productivity. But somehow we are celebrating that behavior and that, you are a good multitasker, and basically it's making us less capable, and we call it ambition.
It's it's a cultural norm that we developed. I mean, another norm that's developed that I think is very relevant here is we have this constant availability culture. At least we have this in the United States, where if your work hours end at 5 or 6 o'clock, you still have to be available, and you're still checking your phone, you're still on email, you're still on Slack, you're still doing work because you're constantly available. Why? Because technology enabled us to do that, right? It's a way to get people to work more. And, what's also interesting is that we have adapted to this to such an extent that it's hard to just be still without any kind of device. So there's a whole industry in microlearning that has developed. And I mean, microlearning has some wonderful benefits. For example, you can learn a language. Learning vocabulary words in French takes a few seconds. But the point is that we have created a culture to always be online, to always be with our devices. And it's hard to just be still and peaceful and not be without any kind of technology.
I think there would be hardly anybody in the planet, except few monks probably, that have ability to stay away from these weapons of mass distraction. And I see the whole world sitting in front of some kind of screen, maybe a phone or a computer or an iPad. At one time, I used to go for my drive where I never used to have a screen. I have a car which has a speedometer now. The cars are also fitted with the screens in front. And if these screens are somehow missing in our life, we feel anxiety, loneliness, fear, FOMO. If we don't see our phone or a screen for some time, we feel we are incomplete. It looks like we are severely addicted to this stimulation through our devices. And we are like a zombies. Somebody has put some substance into us through our eyes, and we are absolutely out of control.
Yes, we're habituated to being on our devices. So it's habits that we've developed. It's a part of ourself that's automatic, right? It uses automatic attention. It responds automatically. When I see a phone next to me, or when anyone sees their phone, their automatic reaction is to pick it up and swipe it open, right? So much of our relationship with our devices is this kind of automatic behavior. So it's not really thinking, it's not intentional. And I would like to contrast that with what the ideal behavior should be. And the ideal behavior should be agency. And agency has two components. It's being intentional in our behavior, and it's putting in constructive effort, right? There's different kinds of efforts. Some effort wears us down, but this is effort that's purposeful. And so having agency is, think of it as like internal power where we can do things. We have goals that we set, we can do things, and it also has to do with where we pay attention. And so to be able to pay attention to those things we want requires agency. And attention is goal directed. So we pay attention to what our goals are. And a lot of what we're seeing is that people might be having the wrong goals, or they may not be seriously thinking about what goals they should have. So if a person's goal is to have fun, then you go on social media. But if your goal is, well, I want to deepen myself, I want to do something that I can grow from, then you're going to do something else. Maybe you're going to have a conversation with someone. If your goal is you want to be peaceful, you can walk out in nature and pay attention to nature. Having a passion project, that's another way to show agency. There's so many ways we can show agency. And so that's an important thing to consider with attention.
I teach mindfulness and meditation, open awareness, where you're paying attention to the things around your environment, or insight meditations where you pay attention to what's happening within your breath or your body. But very few people have ability to sit through these meditations for a longer duration. Minute, 2 minutes after that, they feel bored, they feel distracted, they feel an urge coming very strong, look at their phone, or they're distracted through some other things. Our brain is habitual of so much of stimulation that stillness somehow looks very boring and non-engaging. In fact, I was reading this quote by Jonathan Haidt. He called the anxious generation today. US surgeon called that mental health emergency because the depression has gone up in teenage girls to about 150% since 2012. Since this front-facing camera and an infinite scrolling changed everything for us. I meet so many parents in Mumbai. I recently met a parent, her 14-year-old daughter was very sharp, very curious, very eager to learn, but could not read one full page from a paper book without reaching on her phone. She's on one page and then she has to look at the phone, what's happening. Not because she's lazy that she don't want to read, because her brain has been trained by the 1,000 hours of this short form videos, and she expects stimulation every second. She has not lost intelligence. She has lost the infrastructure to deploy that intelligence. What have we done to this generation, and can we do something for them?
So we've forgotten the ability of how to just be able to sit with one thing. And you're right that watching short form videos, looking at fragmented information online, it's retrained our brains to expect that there's going to be fast switching because the content is switching fast. And so what's going on in our brains is mirroring the way that information is being presented to us. So, we have to think about what we can do to retrain our brains. And we can. And one of the best things that we can do is to pick up reading, read long form books. And it doesn't have to be books that are challenging. It needs to be books where you can be immersed in them so that we can rediscover what it's like to be able to sit with one thing for a while. Because when you read, we're exercising our working memory to be able to read. You have to remember the context. You have to remember from sentence to sentence. And we're also getting experience of deliberation because we're thinking about what we're reading. We're reflecting on it. We're asking questions, mentally asking questions about it. Those are the kinds of skills that we can pick up again when we go back to long-form reading. And again, it might be hard because people aren't used to it. And so the best thing to do is start with something that's interesting, that you can just get transported into another world. And then slowly we can relearn and rediscover. And we will also learn that it's way more fulfilling to be able to finish a book than it is to sit with short TikTok videos for hours, because after we're done, we're not really fulfilled in any kind of deep way.
Yeah. Dr. Mark, you and me both are authors. You have written so many papers. My book name is Observe. Basically, it's work on how do we build attention. I work on decision making. And it is said that the quality of your attention determines the quality of your decisions. The quality of decision determines then the quality of your life. How does attention impact that emotional regulation and decision making?
It's very important, because when we give full attention to something, we allow ourselves to understand the possibilities of what there is. We can weigh the costs and benefits. We can look at the trade-offs. So we have a full set of information that we can work from. And this is what Daniel Kahneman calls type 2 thinking, which is thinking slowly, reflecting, and being able to use that information in choices. So it's extremely connected to good decision making. Yeah.
I recently posted on Dr. Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast. And now with technology coming, it has put one more barrier in our thinking. What happens when work of thinking is delegated to AI?
Yes, this is something I think about a lot, and I write about this a lot. What's happening is that our critical reasoning skills are weakening, and we're seeing this in research already, that the more people rely on generative AI, the weaker is their critical reasoning. I did an experiment with my class when ChatGPT first came out, and when I would give a lecture, I would always require my students to write a summary of the article and to write their reflections about it. Well, ChatGPT just came out, and I told them, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT to do this. And if you do this, I will know. But of course, I was bluffing. How could I possibly know? So I thought about it, and I changed my assignment. And I said, okay, I want you to write the summaries and reflections, and then I want you to use ChatGPT and ask that to do the summary and reflections. And then I want you to revise your own writing based on what ChatGPT does. And then at the end of the course, I had the students evaluate their use of ChatGPT. And it turns out they did not like it at all. But what students really didn't like was the fact that using generative AI created a distance between them and the article. So they weren't directly connected with the article. There's a psychological idea that's called depth of processing. And what that refers to is that when you really are engaged with something and you're giving it your full attention and you're putting in effort to cognitively process it, then you're going to learn that material better. You're going to retain it better. And it doesn't matter what that is. It could be something from school, could be an article you read, it could be in a conversation that you have with another person. So depth of processing is really essential if we really want to retain anything. And when people use generative AI, they're not doing depth of processing. They're offloading the work for this AI to do it for them. And it's producing very polished work, but people aren't touching that information in any kind of meaningful way. And so as a result, their critical reasoning skills are weakening. And that's what the data shows.
If we talk about larger masses, the content created by AI or generative AI is still acceptable. And I met one person, he says, I never used to write an email. Now, since AI has come, I write Queen's English in my emails. So I'm glad that, AI...
He's not writing Queen's English. The AI is writing Queen's English.
Coming from technology. Let's take you somewhere else. I practice something which is deeply rooted into ancient wisdom. Just to explain, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, written about 2000 years ago, and its first instructions says Chit Vritti Nirudh, means yoga is a stillness of fluctuation of the mind. The ancient sages call it chitta. Chitta means mind, the attention, and vritti means the thoughts, the restlessness, the scattered mind. And they built very system to make this mind still. Now, modern science is telling us the same thing, but in a different language. What Yoga Sutras, written 2000 years ago, described in this 8 stages of mental mastery, which is actually yoga. The first 4 are very essential protocols to managing attention, and the last 4 are yam, niyam, dhyan, dharan. The 4 last are basically how you build concentration and focus. Did the ancient scholars solve the problem way too early, what we are now spending 20 years studying now?
I myself am very interested in this idea of stepping back so that we can really be introspective and to really understand ourselves better. So I'm using the language of how we would speak about it today. And I would call it introspection, to really go inside of yourself and to understand how you're paying attention or how you're not paying attention. I call this meta awareness, which is being aware of what you're doing as it's unfolding. And so I've developed my own practice, and this is based on having taken a class in mindfulness. And the idea there is that I probe myself. When I'm on a device, I probe myself. Do I have an urge to look at email? And why do I have that urge? And can it wait? And chances are, yes, it can wait. Or do I have an urge to read news right now? So I've learned to recognize when I have these urges to switch my attention to something else. First, I had to do this very consciously. And now it's second nature. As soon as I feel myself having this urge to switch, I can stop myself and say, do you really need to do that right now? So what is happening is that I'm becoming more intentional. And so earlier I talked about agency is comprised of being intentional and putting in the right kind of effort. And so when I can be more intentional about where I'm paying attention, then I can form a plan. And the plan might be, I'm going to finish working for 20 more minutes, and then I'm going to take a break. So for me, this practice it's very powerful, and it's helped me to be able to focus and pay attention.
Dr. Richard Davidson at University of Wisconsin been working on mindfulness, and I deeply follow his work. Dr. Courtland Dahl was recently on our podcast discussing how to build mental abilities, and they have found that meditators show dramatic increased prefrontal activity and reduced amygdala reactivity. This is what you are exactly explaining. What your research shows that how can we rebuild this attention beyond meditation or other things? Can there be a simple steps that we can follow to build this lost attention?
So first of all, one of the things that we found is that people have natural rhythms of focused attention, what I called controlled attention earlier in the show. And so people tend to have peak attention times. For most people, they have a peak in the morning, then they have a second peak in the afternoon. And this corresponds with the rise and fall of our cognitive resources, right? If you start your day and have good sleep, then you've got a lot of resources and you can pay attention. And then we kind of use up our resources, and then we take a break, we come back, and you can have more resources. And you can pay attention better. So the idea is to understand your own personal rhythm of when your peak focus times are. And, you can design your day around that. So for me, my peak focus is in the morning, not too early. I'm not an early bird. Like starting around 9 o'clock, I'm at my best. And so That's when I plan to do the most important work and the work that requires creativity. And the other thing that we can do that's so important is to take breaks, to not let our minds get fatigued. There's a part of our mind that's called executive function, and you can think of it as the CEO of the mind. And it's what keeps us on track. It helps us meet goals. It helps filter out distractions. It's a really important part of our mind. But when we get fatigued, that executive function ability just can't do its job. And so as a result, we get more easily distracted because it doesn't have the stamina that it needs. So it's really important to take breaks. As soon as you start feeling fatigued, step back. Taking a break to meditate. That's another way to build back our cognitive resources. So again, do it throughout the day, and if possible, take a really long, solid break, preferably in the afternoon. That's ideal if you have the time to do it.
If somehow we can regain our attention by doing these simple steps, it's so easy to. I think most important, I feel, is an intention and a will to bring our attention back. Most people don't even understand that they need to bring their attention back. The attention is somehow lost because our awareness is so much rooted into our external world that our ability to go inward and observe that I have lost my attention is itself require a resource and awareness. And we can break our day in small parts, start early, understand our circadian rhythm where my body feels more relaxed, more focused, more attention. I have one question, little more deeper. What does the future of human attention look like to you in 10 years from now? And do we still speak? Do we still have a mind to speak of?
That's a great question. I am not an oracle, so I really can't say. I would hope that we can regain our senses and put AI in its proper place and put our technology in its proper place, which is these are tools that can make us perform better. We should not be subservient to the tools and let them take us over, but rather we should think of how they can help us expand our own capabilities. And that was the original promise of technology. The idea is that technology should enable humans to be able to do more, right? That we should be able to think better and feel better and connect better with other people. And so we have to go back and think about those earlier visions. We're just on this rapid freight train speeding forward with technology, but I think we need to think back on those earlier visions and think about, what we need to do so that technology can help us achieve our potential, our human potential.
A leader who has to lead in few years now, the children or people who are studying and going to take leadership positions from now onward, any suggestion to them that they should think when they are building focus, attention, what they should do in this distracted world?
I think they should think of how they can inspire other people. It's really important. And that's something that technology is not very good at, but humans are very good at figuring out how to inspire other people. And so I think we need to think about those things that humans are good at. Leaders are the ones who can inspire. And so I would hope that they can still recognize that. And I would also say that leaders should encourage people to use their human skills, their human skills of thinking, of reading, listening, having connections with other people, having emotional intelligence. These are really important human skills.
So, Dr. Mark, you have given our audience a lot of research, your data, your decades of work, your experience. Is there one message you wanted to give the leaders, the young minds that remember about attention, and what that would be as a closing of today's podcast?
I would say one of the most important things we can do is that when we're with another person, another human being, give them your full attention, because that's becoming more and more rare. when we're with other people, we tend to pull out a device out of habit. But what if instead we were to really give our attention to another human being? It's so important. We're making a connection, even in a very small way, right? But these small connections make a difference. And having, of course, a deeper connection with other individuals is extremely important. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mark. This has been truly eye-opening. You did not give us a podcast today. You gave us a mirror, a scientific, rigorous, compassionate mirror to look at our own life, our own mind, our own choices, the places which is so important, so precious. And we talk about this irreplaceable attention. I wanted to say something to everyone who is still here, that the fact that you stayed, you listened the whole podcast without any scroll for these 45, 50 minutes with your undivided mind, that something matters. It's not small thing, it's a big thing that you paid attention and you heard and you watched this podcast in a world of this engineered to fragment your attention. You still with us. It shows that you have a remarkable attention and you are an important leader. Go read Dr. Mark's book, not as a summary, not as a highlight. Read it slowly with full attention. Let it change you. And remember, your attention is not some metric. It is not a resource that are to be optimized. It is your consciousness itself. Guarded it with everything you have, because that's the most precious resource you have. And thank you, Dr. Mark, to choose such a remarkable subject to work on it. I'm Manish Behl from Leaders of the Future. Any last line would you like to say to close this podcast, Dr. Mark?
Well, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share these ideas, especially to an audience that I think would value them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mark. We'll connect. I hope people will read your book and take value from it. Thank you so much.